Greetings, everyone. This is Mike Riley, the voice of Ironman. And this is the Old School Tri Show with my Kiwi mates Cameron Harper and Brian Ashby. The show that talks about all things triathlon, old and new. We're powered by Ansco Foods, bringing you nutrition and good health from New Zealand's beef and lamb. Thanks for listening, everyone. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome along to the Old School Tri Show, brought to us by our great friends at Ansco Foods. And today, Brian, we always talk about these former winners and the legends and the stories, but goodness me, one heck of a story today.
Well, the early years of Ironman New Zealand on the men's side of the race had been dominated by the international competitors. In fact, all the early wins had come from competitors that had come from offshore. But that all changed in 1994 with our next guest, Scott Ballance.
Ansco Foods is proud to be the new naming partner of Ironman New Zealand, ensuring every stroke, pedal and stride is powered by the best nature has to offer. Ansco Foods is on a mission to bring nutrition and good health from New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Ansco Foods, putting the iron in Ironman with New Zealand's finest beef and lamb. Visit anscofoods.com/Ironman to find out more.
Well, completely unrelated to triathlon, completely unrelated to Ironman, Scott Ballance, true or false? The Prime Minister of New Zealand from 1891 to 1893, John Ballance, is one of your distant relatives.
That's a false, unfortunately.
It's false.
False, yeah. I've wondered. I mean, it could be a very distant relative, but not a close relative, that's for sure.
So you haven't got any political aspirations or anything along those lines because it's not even in your DNA?
No, not for me.
Getting into more familiar territory, Ironman, and, look, tremendous. Our first New Zealand male to win at Ironman New Zealand in 1994. Just tell us a wee bit about your journey, I guess, to Ironman. It wasn't your first dance, of course, in 1994, but the Scott Ballance growing up, schooling and sporting interests as a young bloke, and how triathlon sort of became a thing for you.
Well, it's probably a bit of a strange one.
They all are.
Yeah, well, I definitely wasn't an athlete at school or anything like that. I played cricket and rugby. I managed to get in the first 15 for Upper Hutt College in my last year at school, which was sort of a big thing for me. But played in the front row. Would you believe?
Nice.
Yeah, and
Were you a propper or hooker? What
I was a prop. Yeah,
Prop.
Believe it or not.
Prop. Well, I wouldn't have picked it. It's awesome.
No, not many people picked that one. But I think it was, a bit of technique and some core strength, and you can get away with it. Probably not nowadays at the schoolboy level, but back then you could. Yeah. I didn't actually like athletics at school because I found that quite hard. I think I was really competitive, and most of the stuff at those athletics days is all sort of sprinting and so forth. And I just wagged school on those days. And so I didn't really, the first race I actually did was when I was probably 23. The first race I entered was New Zealand Ironman. So
first ever triathlon was
first ever sort of race per se that I actually entered. I think I was always looking for something of a challenge, but I never quite. My family didn't have a really athletic background or sort of running or anything like that. So I was looking for this challenge, and I saw it on TV and thought I could do that. And so my sort of brother-in-law brought home the entry form eventually, said I just stopped talking about it and, fill in the entry form and then you have to do it, so I did. And that was back in the days where you had a paper form and you filled it all in and posted it away. And that was that.
But let's just backpedal a wee bit because, you're 17, 18 playing first 15, you're 23
Yeah.
and you're entering your first Ironman New Zealand.
Yeah.
What happened in the intervening years? You didn't,
Well,
you didn't
yeah,
just
I
go
left.
from the front row to Ironman.
Yeah, well, I left school seventh form, and I joined the army for a couple of years. I used to be in they had those little Scorpion light tank things, and I sort of raced around in those for a couple of years. I think I was looking for a challenge, and probably more of a physical challenge, and that wasn't really, it just wasn't there in the army for what I was looking for. And then I went to university for a couple of years, went overseas for a year like you do. And it was when I came back for my last year at university that I thought, that was when I thought, I'm going to do this Ironman thing. So I kind of started training, I guess, in April, May, 89. At that stage, I've always been, I've always done a little bit of running and so forth, but it was probably, 15, 20-minute runs were a long run. I just started up and started training and read a few books. I read Dave Scott's book, and sort of started from there with nothing. So it was quite a bit of a journey, really.
So the coaching was out of the book. Was the Dave Scott?
Yeah,
yeah,
and it was pre-internet, and and so if you wanted to find some information out, you had to dig around to find it yourself. And I thought, well, Dave Scott's the man. So I got his book and read it, and then I sort of thought, shit, that's a bit more, bit more training than I had envisaged. So, but anyway, so then I went out and started doing it. Yeah.
So do you think your time in the army, Scott, is what sort of got you on that journey towards that way, or was there something else in you over those intervening years from rugby to when you started in 1990 at Ironman?
No, well, I think I always had this thing in my head that I could do something. I could sort of outlast people. Even when I was playing rugby, I probably wasn't great, especially the first half. But as things went on, and you didn't sort of have subs and all that sort of stuff in those days, the last 20 minutes of the game, I sort of started coming into my own and getting to the ball before everyone else, and all. I just had energy to burn. I just didn't get tired. But no, it wasn't the army. It was just this thing inside me that I just thought I want to do something, and I think I can do something. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't until I saw it on TV that I kind of thought, I think that might be it. Yeah.
So like the 1990, you make your debut in Auckland.
Yes.
And you finished 15th. And I mean, again, let's backpedal to April, May when you start your training. What sort of swim and cycling? You talked about your 20-minute runs, but your swim and cycling base and so on. So how, where did you come from with those?
Yeah, well, before then, I had no swimming. I learned how to swim as a kid, and I did that. You do those, you have that certificate thing that has all the things, including the 1,500 metre, and I did the 1,500 metre, and my mum said I swam most of it under the water sort of thing, but I did it, because that's, and so when I started, I think that, I was sort of swimming. I remember going down early on and going, right, I'll go down and I'll swim 3 lengths freestyle and a length backstroke, breaststroke, and I just started off doing that because that's all I could do. It was, I had no swimming background at all. Same with the bike. I just sort of jumped on a bike and rode around for a bit and just started making it further and further and getting into the hills, and it just started. It was basically starting completely from scratch. But my running, I think I had run, like I said, 2 or 3 times a week for 20 minutes for as long as I can remember when I was a kid. So that kind of wasn't such a big challenge, because once I got past, I distinctly remember the day that I went, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to run past my turnaround place where I normally turn around when I go for my run, and I'm going to have to keep going. I can't just go there 10 minutes out and turn around and come back. So I ran out half an hour out and turned around and grovelled back, and that's like, you got to start somewhere, and that's where I started.
Did you
And
like
that
the
was,
training? Did you love the? Did you find a love for the
yeah,
out of the
I,
gate
I
shot
love the
driving?
training. I really love
Yeah,
the training.
yeah,
It just the biking. I really enjoyed the biking. There's plenty of you get out in the countryside and so forth. Swimming I never really loved, but it was just a sort of a necessary evil, I suppose, for me. And running was always my thing. So that just sort of picked up, and I found very quickly within a couple of months, I suppose, I could run for 3 hours, and it was really comfortable. It just sort of happened like that. I don't really know why. But again, I remember when I was a kid, and I was, in the summer I'd play cricket with my mates, and I'd be out there and I could bowl for 4 or 5 hours and not get tired, sort of thing. So I guess that's all running around. So it's all sort of building your base without even knowing it, sort of
yeah.
stuff. Yeah.
What was it like then when you 1990 and you rock up to Auckland? You're standing on the beach with all these other competitors there. It's your first race. You haven't really done things by halves.
Yeah.
How intimidating was it?
Well, it wasn't the first race.
It wasn't.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the first race I did. It was the first race I entered, I think. And then I thought, I'm going to have to do some races because I don't know anything about this triathlon stuff. And I've gone and entered the Ironman. So I entered some local events, and I think I did a couple of local events, and I think the first race I did was like a 10K in Kapiti, I think, and it was just sort of a local 10K thing. And I thought, right, I'll just try and follow the guys in the front, and pretty quickly I was the guy in the front. So I was like, pretty quickly realised that I was, it's a little bit confronting really, because I've never really been that sporty, and all of a sudden I was that guy who's like fast, and but that's just what it was. And so and I went up and did the half Ironman in Tauranga. That was the first year they had it up there, and managed to win it. But looking back, I think I swam 30 minutes and biked 2:30 or something like that. It was pretty pedestrian by modern standards, but ran an hour 15 or something like that. So I sort of, it's just things improved pretty quickly with that race though, and I went back a year later and went 15 minutes faster and got third, I think. So it's how it was. Yeah.
So you must have been from going from just this bloke going out for the odd jog for 20 minutes a few times a week to then ramp up your training to then turn up to Tauranga and win the half when you first go or the first race. I mean, that's a race with a heck of a lot of history, just like Ironman New Zealand. But there must have suddenly people been going, who the heck is this Scott Molina fella? Sorry, my apologies, it's not Ballance. The Scott Molina.
Who the
hell's this other Scott? Who's else?
Scott? Well, that's a nice comparison anyway. I did get that a little bit. I remember some guys saying in Wellington, there's this, I heard a friend of mine that I made friends with, and he said, everyone thought you were from Palmerston North or New Plymouth, I think it was. The word was this guy from New Plymouth, and he's just come down. But it's sort of, it was just one of those things where you just go with the flow, really. And I think that first half Ironman was a real eye opener, because I was sort of quite a way back on the swim and bike, but I ran really well, and I just ran everyone down. And that sort of gave me a lot of confidence. And I thought, well, looking at that, I was hoping to do under 10 hours at Auckland, which was sort of maybe, I just thought that was what I could do. So, yeah.
And so you came in 15th, and you rock home. And what was the feeling afterwards? Were you in love with the distance after your debut?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably everyone. I know I did every time I did an Ironman. I said I'm never doing that ever to myself ever again. It's just it's crazy and it's stupid and it's just too hard. But pretty quickly after that, I because I qualified for Hawaii, so duly, I was kind of in a little bit of a place where I wasn't quite sure what I was going to be doing with my life. I suppose I was kind of trying to work out, like you do what you're going to do for a career, and this just popped up, and I qualified for Hawaii. So I thought, look, I'm going to give that 100% shot, and I'll just sort of, make a living at home doing whatever I've got to do to make a bit of money to pay my way, sort of thing. So that's what I did.
And that first trip to Kona, tell us a wee bit about that. That was, I guess, a different shock to the system again.
It was, yeah. I was actually doing pretty well for whatever, you can, from my experience and everything, I was doing reasonably well. I think I was on track to do a sort of a similar sort of time, and jumped off the bike and just ripped my hamstring getting off the bike, basically. And so that was sort of ended up doing a 4:20 marathon or something like that in a 10.5 hour day. But, it's really hard. Like, everyone knows it's really hard when you train really hard for a race, put everything into it, and something like that happens when you think you're going quite well. But that's just that's Ironman, isn't it? And triathlon and sports in general.
Yeah.
You have your good days and your bad days, and you've got to be able to take them and learn from them. Yeah.
Did you travel to Europe at some point around this point as well? And sort of keep
where was that?
To Europe?
Yeah. Well, my parents went over to the UK. They were retired, and they went over to the UK and found a job working for a sort of a rich American guy who had 3 or 4 houses around the world, and one of them was in the UK. And he stayed there for about a month a year, and the rest of the time, they just lived there and mowed the lawns, sort of thing. So I went over and stayed with them, and it was a great base. Stayed with them for a year, and I met a swim coach over there, and I stayed with her for a couple of years after that. Did a lot of UK races and some European races, and it was great. It's a great time.
Any Ironmans over there at all?
I tried to do Lanzarote, but I think I'd done Zofingen before, and it just I could never back up on races. My body just said no, it's not going to happen. And always
Lanzarote's one heck of a race to try and back up into, isn't it?
It is, and it is a fantastic race. I mean, you're not going to set any PBs there, but it's the sort of race that just sort of takes my fancy. That's for sure. It's really hard, and it's a real strong man's race, and that's what I like about it. So I would have loved to have gone back and given it a really good shot, but that just didn't happen. So
so small gains being made all the time, and in 1991 you're back on the start line in Auckland again, and this time you're the second Kiwi home. I think you might have even beaten Lothar Leader in the race that day, possibly, or maybe that was the next year. But how much more confident were you in 91 when you were on the start line?
Well, I knew I was, I knew I was considerably better than I had been the year before. I think the first year I swam about an hour, and I knew I'd got my swim time down to about 55 minutes. So there's sort of 5 minutes free time before you even start in my head. I think I went half an hour quicker and was probably two places further down the field, I think, off the top of my head, because the fields in those years were incredibly strong, because there was only 5 Ironman races in the world. So the international guys coming over were, had some real depth, which was great.
Well, I remember that. I remember reading back about that 91 race, and you got a guy like Dirk Ashmane, coming out of Europe that could cycle like a train, and the Americans trying to hang on to him. It got incredibly quick, incredibly fast, didn't it?
Yeah, I think that was it was an era where, that 1990 race was probably a watershed race. That first Ironman, I was running out by, I think I was about Mission Bay, heading out towards Teal Park, so I was an hour behind them, and I saw Ken and Paulie coming back the other way, and I was just like, holy, they were like shoulder. It was like a track race, shoulder to shoulder, even 2Ks out. It was. I wanted to turn around and go and watch it, sort of thing. But but I was sort of dragging myself around there. But yeah, I think very, very quickly the level went up. I saw Scott talking about how he came over, and obviously he dominated early on because the level. When you start on those sort of events, and it's probably similar to the half in Tauranga, very quickly it becomes a lot more competitive. That 91 race was it was a real watershed in the depth, which was good, which is great for the sport.
Yeah, and in terms of you sort of feel like you're moving ahead, and I guess 92. Gosh, I think you're up to about 7th overall then. So what were the gains? Were there specific areas that you targeted within your sort of overall game plan in terms of your training that you were able to sort of crunch down on and say, okay, if I get this right, it'll set me up for the marathon here, or just what was going on at that point?
I think there was a combination of just getting stronger and fitter, because when you start with nothing. Every year you're much stronger, just from the work that you've done. Probably 92, I worked really hard on my bike, and it didn't really improve. And I did learn there. I had to change my training on the bike. I at that stage I'd go out on my bike and I'd just ride my bike everywhere flat out. And that was fine. It makes you super strong, but it doesn't make you fast. Mm-hmm. So I had to learn that lesson. So I was a bit disappointed with that. I ran well, and my swimming, I think, improved again. So, it's sort of, I probably bike much the same, but it's a bit of a long time ago to remember all those ones. But it was just a steady progression. But 92, I did learn I'm going to have to do something different on the bike if I want a different result. 93 or moving forward, I'm strong, but I'm just not fast enough.
You mentioned before, Scott, about coaching, and you talked originally about Dave Scott's book, and you mentioned the swimming, picking up a swim coach. Were you still being self-taught or self-coached in this period, or did you get advice from other people, or you meet up with other?
Yes, I did end up being self-coached the whole way through, but I did pick up some advice from different people, and I'd sort of, sort of blend that all together and take what I thought would work for me, and so forth. So I got quite a lot of advice from Tony O'Hagan. He was always very willing and happy to share his knowledge, and even though we're bashing heads on the race track, he was free with his information and quite happy to share it with me and try and help me improve. So I was grateful for that. And the other one was probably Karen always had Arthur Clapp was her sort of mentor, and Arthur really by default became my mentor as well. And I'd bounce ideas off him and Karen and Tony, and just trying to sort of keep track of, keep things together and work out, like I said, what works for me. Because I had a bit of a funny body and it didn't like too much training, and so I had to sort of work that out carefully. Yeah.
You in 92 was that your second trip to Kona? You had a much better, much more positive experience this time around.
Yeah. I think I think that was my third. I think like in 91 I might have got about 30th or something, and 92 22, maybe about 20th or something like that.
Yeah, that's
off the top of my head. So it's sort of steady improvements.
yeah.
Yep, yeah.
93, the race then, I look at sort of who was the names that were involved in the race there, and the depth of the Kiwi talent coming through as well. Sort of some of the guys that have been around for a wee bit longer, the Johns, the Knights, and the Hugheses, and you mentioned Tony O'Hagan, Matt Brick, and so on, and yourself. That's a real sort of depth building. But then there's these white hot Americans as well who are on top of their game. But you did that feel like a step forward for you? You're you're just off the podium when at the end of that day.
Yeah. It's 93 we're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It was a bit of a funny race actually, because I'd worked really hard on my biking, and then I got a drafting call, and so in those days you were pulled over on the spot and sat on the side of the road for 4 minutes. And it kind of happened when it was a bit of a funny one. I learned, it was another thing where you learn something that we caught up with this guy who'd sort of blown up one of the swimmers. He was going a bit slow, and there was 2 or 3 cars stuck behind him. And I got a bit I wasn't sure of where. One of the things they were saying is you can't cross the centre line or you'll get penalised. And then I was sort of like, do I cross the centre line and try and pass this guy, or do I just sit here until the road's a bit less windy? And I sat there too long and got done for drafting. So I kind of, it was a bit disappointing, I guess. At that stage, it was probably 130k, and I was maybe 3 minutes off the pace, but with the main group, and there was a couple of guys off the front. I think Ken and someone. Melina, yep.
Yeah.
And that was the year where they went off course in the front as well. So the 2 leaders were taken off course, essentially top it was about 2k shortcut. So when I got back on the bike after doing my penalty, I was 3 minutes behind them, and in the next split I was 11 minutes behind them. And I was just thinking, well, how the hell does that happen? I mean, I've lost like so much time. I've lost 8 minutes, and I was only sitting there for 4 minutes. And then I just said, oh, well, I'm just going to ride my own race. And so I rode by myself all the way back into town. And pretty much at the end of the day, when I went back and you looked at it and all worked out, I actually rode pretty much the same as everyone else.
Yeah.
So I was really pleased when I realised that, my biking now I'd worked very hard on my biking and so forth. So I was pleased that came out. And that's when they did that extra loop in Auckland, and they added a little bit at the end of the bike where you went through the transition and headed out towards Mission Bay and did an extra little loop at the end, because that's what they made these front 2 guys do and it was such a success. That's what they did from then on, I think, in Auckland.
It'd be interesting as I was just looking at those 93 results, and heck of a top 5, because here you are sitting in 4th with Lothar Leder, young man out of Germany in those days, sitting in 5th. I mean, he goes Glar, Ashmane, Kropko, Ballance, Leder. I mean, goodness me, that's one heck of a top 5.
It was a real. I was pretty devastated with the drafting call. That. And I just thought, I learned something there that, you just got to keep thinking all the time, really. But anyway, that was great. When I sat down and looked back at the results, I thought, that's, that's really amazing. I just remember Peter Kropko coming past right near the end and sort of saying, nice try, boy, sort of thing, in his Hungarian. He was a great guy. He was a real character. So he was a strong man. So, I did feel like a boy when he ran past, sort of thing. But no, that was great. That was I guess that was a really good race, because, like you say, that was an amazing field. And when I started, I think, like you said before, I think when I started in 1990. the talk was about you have your internationals coming over there. One of those guys is going to win the race, and then there's this other race. Who's going to be the first Kiwi, and can they get in the top 10, sort of thing. Whereas by '93, I was starting to think, well, if everything goes well, I could win this, or Tony could win this, or a Kiwi can win this race.
Yeah.
You've got to take your chances when they come, but a Kiwi could do it.
Sorry, Brian, I was just going to say that it's interesting, and you mentioned this before, Brian, but looking at that, there were 5 Kiwis in the top 10 that year with yourself at the front of that. I mean, Brendan Downey, Matt Brick, Harlan Smart, Tony O'Hagan. There's some serious athletes in there. There's some serious horsepower, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I mean, guys like Harlan. I mean, he could have been anything. It was amazing. He was probably the most talented guy I've ever met in my life, and just if he could have put it all together, he could have done amazing things, I think. But it was the depth, the New Zealand depth was building and building. And I think that comes partly from the confidence that if a Kiwi does well, the better the Kiwis do, the more you think, well, actually we can compete with these guys. We can actually might not be able to beat them all, but we can be right up there and competing with them, and giving it a shot.
How much of a motivation for the Kiwi guys, such as yourself and other names that we've mentioned, was seeing what Erin was doing on the women's side of the competition?
Yeah, well, I mean, Erin was obviously she was a big influence on me. The first Ironman I did, I think I beat her. I did beat her, and I remember I passed her about 70k into the bike, and I remember thinking, there's Erin Baker. She doesn't look that great, and cockily thinking that. And then about 10k's to go on the bike, she rode back past me, and she was looking pretty good at that stage. And I just remember thinking, well, that's what it is, isn't it? That's what she does. But I managed to hold her out in the run, so I was pretty proud of that effort. She's a total legend. I think it's part of that New Zealand thing. If she could do it, why can't we can do it? The men can do it. If she can do it, why can't the men?
So we're set up beautifully for 1994, and the punchline is Scott Ballance wins this day, but it wasn't all smooth sailing for you going into that race, was it?
No, well, after that 93 race, Tony asked me to come up to Palmerston North and do a multi-sport sort of thing and do a run with a team. He was doing the bike, and there was a guy who I can't remember that was a really good kayaker, and so we're sort of a bit of a dream team, and so it was just a fun thing to just go up and do a multi-sport local event. But sort of, I think that was probably 3 or 4 weeks after the Ironman, and then I kind of got, I got a sore throat and a bit of a cold, and it just kind of never went away. The cold went away, but I felt really washed out and tired. I sort of ended up with chronic fatigue. And I was over in Europe, and I knew I was in trouble when one day in England I got out of bed and I opened the curtains, and the sun sort of came in the window, and I was like, I just don't want to look at the sun, it's too bright, and and I love the sun, so I knew there was something weird going on. So I came home and kind of tried to get myself healthy, and probably about August, I just sort of started coming right and got back into some light training. So probably had 3 months off, and I couldn't do anything. Walking around the block was exhausting, so it was a bit of a hard time.
That's an insane turnaround then to get yourself to the start line in 94. what sort of advice and things did you have to I guess make that turnaround, or was it just were you self-managed, or how did you sort of?
Yeah, in the end, it was. You start thinking it's all in your head, or is there something psychological? Or I remember going to get all these tests done to see if I had sort of, intolerances, and you get to a point where you really start to think, maybe it's me, maybe it's all in my head. I know it wasn't, because it did actually take years to sort of really come right, but I just sort of rested up, and eventually I started feeling reasonably good and got back into things, and then I found I entered this duathlon in Wellington in maybe October or November, might have been November. I'd been training steadily, but nothing major, and that day I couldn't. I just couldn't hurt myself. I was just like, I could ride. I rode faster than I've ever in my life, and ran. I don't know. It was completely strange. That my body obviously, I don't know, did what it did and came right. So yeah.
So if you fast forward then into the new year and say beginning of February, a month out from a start in Auckland, how sort of confident were you feeling about your prospects at that point?
Yeah, that year was the year that the World Champs were in Wellington, World Triathlon Champs, and so I was trying to get in the men's team, and it was 3 drafting days. And Tony and I were both trying hard. They had a selection race down here in Christchurch. I think Tony won the half, and I got maybe 3rd, so that was a bit of a confidence booster that I was sort of reasonably on track. They had the selection race down here at Corsair Bay, out Orton Bradley Park kind of race, which is really, really, really hilly. And then the run was sort of up in Littleton, around, again, super hilly, 3 loops. It was just a monster race, and right up my alley. So, it was almost inevitable. It came down to Tony and I maybe running shoulder to shoulder for 5Ks, and me just managing to get away at the end, and that built my confidence again. But obviously, you're thinking there at the start of the Ironman that, I haven't really done quite as much work as I'd like to have done. But then again, I know I'm pretty fit and seem to be going well, so you just don't know.
So did you have, going into that 94 race, did you, have any real expectation on how you'd go with all the, you've talked about how, you went along well in the selection race, you went well in the half, everything seemed to be working, but did you have any expectation to go, you know what, this is me, this is my year?
No, I didn't really. I thought, I knew I'd been racing well, but the selection race in Wellington, which was the sort of the national champs, I got got out of bed that morning. I could hardly get out of bed. I couldn't do the race. I was just, and that's that sort of chronic fatigue thing, just coming back and dragging you back down again. So I was a bit, I wasn't terribly confident that I could, I wasn't, I hoped I'd have a reasonable day. It was sort of, but all I really wanted to do, I just wanted to be competitive and have fun and race against the guys and see if I could, my big goal really was to stay with the front main guys on the bike and not end up behind, I just wanted to get off the bike with the front guys. That was my real goal, because I'd worked really hard on my biking so I could do that, and then I could use my running to do whatever I could do. But so that was really my goal for the day.
So plan A worked pretty well in terms of your bike work, because suddenly you find yourself off the front, and it's like, whoa, this is unfamiliar territory.
Yeah, well, it was a very strange day because I really struggled on the bike. The swim was just a swim, and I think Rick Wells was off the front, and another American guy, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, was a minute or so up the road, and we caught him. I was really hanging on for most of that bike ride. And, for those who haven't been out on that Auckland course. It's a chunky monster that, there's nowhere to hide out there. So coming back from Kawakawa Bay to Clevedon, there's sort of a big false flat area, and Ken Glar he was starting to get pretty upset that no one else was trying to catch Rick. I certainly wasn't. I was just hanging on for grim death. He just took off, and he dropped Tony and myself, and it took off with 2 or 3 of the other guys. So when we got back to Clevedon, which I think maybe is 45 k's to go, Tony and I were like 90 seconds behind. So I remember, I distinctly remember being dropped. I was hanging on and like gritting my teeth and hanging on for grim death. And eventually I just couldn't do it anymore. And I thought, this is just crazy. And then I do remember thinking that the year before I'd ridden that last 45, 50 Ks, 60 Ks, whatever by myself, and I'd done all right. And so I might just relax, ride my ride. I know I'm riding okay. I think I'm feeling, I think I've got endurance. If I just ride my own pace, I can minimize the gap, and I'm probably still going to get off the bike closer to the front than I've ever been. So that sort of went through my head, and then I distinctly remember going from being sort of like super tense to kind of relaxing and just saying, right, I'm just going to ride this ride and just ride it smooth, steady, power, just focus on just being efficient and powerful. And that's what I did. And and shortly after Clevedon, I think, like I said, we were 90 seconds down, and then I could start seeing at the start you kind of go, I think maybe that's that front pack up there, but I can't quite tell. And then you sort of can tell there's motorbikes, and eventually you can tell, that's them. And and then caught up with them within about, I don't know, 10 or 15 Ks, caught back up. And then I thought, I'll catch. I've caught up with the group. You got to kind of ride up the front and say, well, I'm back, So I just rode off to the front, rode for 4 or 5 minutes, and thought, well, some of these guys should come through and do a little bit of work. I mean, you're not drafting, but you're kind of loosely rolling around. And so I had a look behind, and they were 300 meters behind me. So that's when I kind of thought, shit, what do I do now? I've dropped them. What do you do? Yeah, and because I'd never gone into my head that my plan was to get off the bike with Ken Glar. That was my plan. And now I was in front of Ken Glar. So what do you do? Do you sort of sit up and just relax and ride your own pace and let them catch up or whatever? So I just thought, no, I'm just going for it. So
I don't think I've ever heard a bigger first world problem than sitting at the front of an Ironman. What do I do now?
Well, I wasn't at front at that stage because Rick was still in front of us.
Okay.
But in my head, that was where the race was there. Yeah, and I had kind of thought, do I just throw all my eggs in the one basket and just go for it, or do I, what do I do? And I remember thinking, well, I prefer not to get off the bike with Ken Glar because he's not the beast from the east for nothing. He'll just smash you. And so I just went for it. I felt fantastic. I suddenly was in the zone, obviously, and I just rode hard out. And then next thing I could see the lead vehicle and past Rick, and that was that. You're in the lead of the Ironman off the bike.
How close to T2 were you when you got wrecked?
I think it was probably 7 or 8 Ks from the finish.
Yeah.
But those last 10 Ks on that course were horrendous. They're just so hilly. It's just up and down and up and down. And, when you're at that 170 K mark and you've got to go over these sort of hills, I think Rick was starting to suffer, and I was just like on fire. So I just went straight past him. So probably put a minute and a half on him, I think, in that 5, 7, 8 Ks. Yeah.
Suddenly you're the first 15 prop again who is finding his way to the 80-minute mark in the last 20 minutes of the game when everyone else is faded.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a very good analogy. It's just one of those things where you just, I do remember thinking that this is probably faster than I should be going, but the other side was thinking, well, I'm going to make it so those guys know I'm a runner, or they think I'm a great runner. I'm going to make it that I'm so far in front that they're not even going to think about trying to catch me. So that was my game plan, and at that stage, that's how I thought it should be, and so that's what I did. I got off the bike and I sprinted, sort of thing.
And how did that pan out for you?
It was good for the first half. The second half of the run was horrendous. So yeah. But by that stage, I knew I had a good lead. But I had to play a lot of mind games to get myself through that last half of the marathon.
Because that's what I was going to say. What's going through your head? You're like, geez, I've gone from chronic fatigue. I mean, this is flipping serious to not being able to compete in the selection race for the New Zealand team, to suddenly not just being with the front pack, but you left them behind, and you're in the second half of the marathon thinking, shit, this is getting real. What goes through your head at the moment? Because like you say, you got Ken Glar, Tony O'Hagan. I mean, you got Benny Lindbergh from Finland. These guys are running. They're runners, man. They can go.
Yeah. I knew. The funny thing is and I'd never experienced that in an Ironman before. But when you're in the lead, you don't get splits or anything. You don't have. You just get so used to. You're a minute behind the next guy, or you're 3 minutes off the lead, or whatever it is, and you can tell how you're going because it's all so. But I had Karen and Harlan Smart, actually, who you mentioned before. Harlan was down there being crazy as he was, and I just said I need some splits, and so Karen and Harlan were taking splits, and they were on bikes, and then they'd ride up and tell me what was going on. So it was a bit, it was sort of, nowadays you'd have, I don't know, people texting and online, and you could do it all, but that's how you had to do it back then. You just had to I had to know what was going on. I just had to know, and so that's what they did. So I'm forever grateful for them doing that. I remember I had some stomach problems. I had the worst stomach problems I've ever had. Just really bad gut, and that slowed me down quite a bit. But by the time I got to 12 Ks to go, I was just saying to myself, I had a 12K run I did every weekend. I was just mentally running that run, like each K I was at this place, and I was running through Johnsonville and Wellington. I'm at this place, and I'm coming. And then 6 Ks to go, I'm coming back home, and I've only got 6 Ks to go, and I've done this hundreds of times, and I've just kept saying that to myself. But also mentally, I was doing quite a lot of arithmetic and working out how far back Ken was, and each K that clicked off and he wasn't closing the gap too much was obviously, meant that the gap between us, the difference of speed between us had to get bigger and bigger the closer you got to the finish. He was running out of road, and I, that was that's a nice thing for me to know.
What was it like those final couple of Ks when, as you've just described, you probably knew that it was in the bag? Describe the final couple of Ks and when you get to that finishing chute.
Yeah, well, you're starting to head back to the transition area. I remember seeing a friend of mine who was just starting the bike and starting the run. Sorry, he was, and just thinking, shit, you've got a long way to go, and I'm nearly finished, you poor bastard. But it was just one of those things where you're like, I remember thinking, look, just don't do anything stupid. Just keep it smooth. I don't care about how slow it is. I've got it. And the only thing that's going to beat me is like if I get a cramp or do something, try and do something, run too fast, or because my hamstrings at that stage were about an inch long, and my guts was terrible, and I was just rolling in the gutter sort of thing. But I also knew that Ken was going to have to. I was still running probably 430 k's at that stage, and Ken was not. He was going to have to take. He was running whatever, close to 4, but he was only taking 30 seconds a k out of me, and that's fine at that stage. I didn't care because I had a big enough buffer.
Mm.
Yeah. So yeah, it was good. It was great. I just remember I've just got to get to the finish. I've got to get to the finish. Don't mess it up now. Yeah.
You hit the finishing chute. Was there a feeling of euphoria, relief? What happened? Describe
well, I think if you watch enough sports, you see that common theme of people. You don't even know you're doing it, but your hands come up to your head, and you can't. I couldn't fathom it, how you go from, I guess, going from where I'd started from to this, and further down the journey, the more logical it becomes. But it's still, if you look like 5 years ago, I was doing nothing, and now I'm standing here doing this. It's crazy. It was completely crazy. It was amazing. It was, obviously it was just, it was just an amazing feeling.
Did it take, how many, how long did it take for it to sink in that you were the Ironman New Zealand champion? I mean, initially you've got the whole exhaustion factor and your body's completely broken and all of those things, but to perhaps step aside from it all and look at it and analyze the whole thing and the emotion of it all to just sink in the enormity of what you'd achieved.
Yeah, I think well, for me, I knew on the road when I was running, this is massive. This is a massive thing. It's, I'm potentially going to be I could be the first Kiwi to win, man to win this race.
Mm-hmm.
I could win this race, just saying that in your head is kind of crazy talk, but it was just, it did take a while, I suppose. I mean, it's just a deep down satisfaction, and though for me on the day, I really just know that I knew a few Ks out that I was going to win unless something really strange happened. It was still pretty hard to get across that last few Ks. It was just hard yakka, but that was about it, really. I mean, later on, I suppose you realise what you've done when you look back at it. I think probably more than anything, I look back at it now, and it seems like a completely different world.
You're a really understated sort of a dude, and I just wonder, what did it give you, in terms of your psyche and confidence, having that sort of underpinning your life moving forward? How important was it for you?
Yeah, I think that's a valid, a very good point. Is that, I think everyone, when they're young and in their lives, and they're kind of looking for something to pin themselves on or whatever, it's something you can never take away. It's something that's always there. Something like, I don't think about it that much anymore, but I still do think about it. I'm running around Hagley Park like a snail when someone runs past me, and I just think to myself, well, you haven't won the Ironman, so,
Damn right.
But it doesn't matter because you're running a lot faster than me, and, that's the way it is, it's, you can't take it away from me. And I love the way, personally, for me, I think the biggest thing was doing it myself, the coaching myself, and starting from absolutely scratch, putting it all together with the help of a lot of different people, like, Dougal, my swim coach, and Arthur and Karen and Tony, poor old Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned Tony a lot, and not just in the '94 race and so on. But I just wonder, were you guys working together in races, or was it instinctive that you were able to sort of second guess each other, and without really thinking about it, ended up sort of helping each other a bit?
I think we I don't know why. Whenever we're in the water, you've got 1,000 people or whatever at a start line. 200 meters down the track, I'm looking over at his face and thinking, why is he always there? Like, I can, and sort of thing. But yeah, that's fine. No, I think, we had sort of different strengths as well. So I was always aware that Tony was an incredible bike rider.
Yeah.
I sometimes wondered, sometimes he showed it more than others, but, when he was on, he was unbelievable. And so for me, it was kind of like stay with Tony on the bike, and if I can stay with Tony on the bike, I've got a chance. If he goes, I remember like in Tauranga one year, it was sort of a bit of a funny race, and there was quite a reasonably big group on the bike, and I hadn't seen Tony all day, and there was 20 k's to go on the bike, and I stupidly thought to myself, I think I've got this one. I'm the best runner. It's 20 k's to go on the bike. What can go? It's almost won, and then literally the next second he came past like a car and put 4 minutes on us in the last 20 k's, and that was like, you just looked at him, and I looked at him going up the road, and I thought, shit, he's not even slowing down. It's not like an attack. He's just going for it, and he just obviously rode that fast all the way back to the transition, and never saw him again. So that was Tony. So you couldn't, we didn't really work together, but he would say sometimes tell me to back off a bit. I was a bit keen sometimes, like save your energy, don't do too much work at the front, because I sort of like to be at the front a bit. So he would help me out on the road a little bit, but not too much.
To viewers on the Old School Tri Show podcast here, we're referring to Tony O'Hagan here, who we lost a couple of years ago, an absolute icon in the sport of triathlon in New Zealand, and obviously at Ironman New Zealand, and a good friend of yours, Scott. Because it was obviously as Ironman New Zealand's champion in '94, another Kona trip, Beacon.
Yeah. And Tony and I were there together in '94. It just didn't happen that day. Ironman's a funny thing, and looking back, I think I wasn't a great swimmer, and I really depended on my wetsuit to get me through. And over in Kona, like it's a real swimmer's race. So if you're a good swimmer and you get out in a good pack, back in those days anyway, that made a huge difference. And so guys who would normally, say in Auckland, you'd be a couple of these swimmers would come over. Normally you'd catch them within 40 k's. But in Kona, they'd be 10 minutes in front of you. You'd never see them again, and they'd get off the bike 10 minutes in front of you. So, '94, Tony and I probably talked each other into pulling out at the same time, and it was all going past our motel, and that was the end of this.
There's a cold beer in the fridge just in the
well, that's pretty much it. Yeah, and you're like, well, it's just not happening, and I don't know. You've got. Sometimes you have to make those choices of, you've got another race down the track, or, you can go and really mutilate yourself. And for me, it used to take me at least a month to recover. Is that worth, is it worth it? Sounds a bit harsh, but, you got to pick your races and if it's not happening, I'm going to move on to the next race and save my energy up.
Yeah. So '95, you're back in Auckland, and suddenly the dynamics changed completely, because you're the bloke with the big target on your back. You are the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
male and you
yeah.
were going as defending champion. What was that like?
Yeah, it was good. I was a bit disappointed not to get like first seed.
Yeah.
That got up my nose a bit, and I think that probably got in my head a little bit as well because I'm a bit probably a bit emotional sometimes. And but you know, it was again one of those races, and I think after '94, I had a few years where I really did have back into that health issues. I had very variable days. I tried to adjust my training so that, you know, like that I'd add in more rest days and so forth, but it just didn't, that even, you know, like sometimes I'd do like 4 days of training and have 2 days off. And then the next day, the third day, I'd wake up and I'd be absolutely destroyed. So, yeah, no, I don't know. There was not a lot of logic to that for me. So, yeah, from then on, it was sort of quite hard work, but variable, really, for racing. Yeah.
But you were always there or thereabouts in Auckland, and then subsequently in Taupo. So you were always in the mix and always putting the hurt on people, and everyone was always sort of looking over their shoulder for you. What the move from Auckland to Taupo in '99? How important was that? And did you enjoy that change of venue for Ironman New Zealand?
Yeah, I think I enjoyed the parts of it. I mean, I loved the Auckland course. It was a hard man's course, and you were never going to set a PB on it, and it was it was pretty brutal, and so you could work people over and really, put the hurt on them, and if you're really willing to put the effort in, you could break away anywhere on the hills because, Taupo had its own challenges, so it's a completely different race. It's a lot flatter. You've got to stay in that position and kind of and so forth. So yeah, but I did like Taupo. It had the scenic thing, and in Auckland was just getting too. Auckland was just getting too busy at the end of the day, so it probably wasn't viable anymore up there. I haven't been up there and out on the course since the race, but it's probably all built in and completely changed from what it was. Yeah, and Taupo's a lovely race. Water's great. I love water.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because you sort of sound as though you weren't overly enamoured with the swims in Auckland, but that changed to the beautiful, pristine Lake Taupo and the fresh water and perhaps a little calmer some of the time, not all of the time. In the sense
Yeah, I didn't love swimming and I wasn't great at it, but people said I had the fastest wetsuit in town, sort of thing, because I could swim a lot better with a wetsuit on and throw that on, and I was much more competitive. And open water swimming for some reason always suited me a lot more than the pool. So I didn't actually mind the swim in Auckland. I quite enjoyed it. It's one of those swims where you swim out for 1,500 meters in a straight line and then 800 meters across, and when you're out that 1,500 meters doing the 800 meters across, it's a long way back into the beach. But I guess it's like every race. They've all got their pluses and minuses and their good points and everything. Taupo's got it's got a great atmosphere, and yeah.
In those later years, in your sort of last years at Ironman, things had changed a little bit. And so you mentioned Karen and giving you splits in 94, 99, she's racing there for the first time. She's Karen Mills. A year later, she's Karen Ballance and so on. What was it like competing as partners racing together?
Yeah, I think we did it pretty well. We never really had any on race day. We never had any issues with each other. Getting there and getting up and sleeping or not sleeping, and don't sleep very well. Well, I never slept very well before a race, and so we worked together as a team really in our home life, so that we could, she was always working full time pretty much, so and I wasn't, so I kind of did did a lot more stuff that so she could do her training, and I had spent a lot more spare time, so that worked out. Racing wise, we always kept an eye on each other, and I always coming back, like I distinctly remember, like in Taupo, because she never raced Auckland, but I always remember riding back from the first turnaround and watching the first woman come and looking at a watch and working out how far behind she was, and kind of giving her a bit of a wave. She never waved back, probably, but but she was always looking. She just didn't wave back. Yeah. Except the year when she won, and she wouldn't even look at me, kind of thing. She was in a real, which is great. It's what she needed.
Totally. Totally in the zone. 2002. It was a wonderful result. So we've got two balances that are Ironman New Zealand's champions here. But I guess the sad part, Scott, is that you couldn't go out on your own terms in terms of your professional career.
Yeah, I mean, it was just one of those things, really. I suppose I had this heart issue, and it's that sudden death heart issue that you see those soccer players. I hate seeing those soccer players fall over on TV. I just go, shit, I don't want to see that. I really don't want to think about that too much. But that's where it is. So, but I kind of, when I look back at it, I think, well, I kind of feel like I was sort of given this gift, and I had it for 13 years or whatever, and then it was just taken away and given to someone else, and I was lucky to have it. While I had it, it was something really amazing. But my life's full of stuff that I miss it, but I don't miss it, if that makes sense. I'm too busy doing other stuff.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, I've been out riding, and I've seen you doing awful climbs like the Bastard. You ride up past me still, and you've raced Sea to Sky triathlon in Christchurch, and I know you've been back and done Port of Tauranga. So you've got your good news for people on the podcast. Yes, you've got your body under control, and things are good.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of touch wood. I know what I can do and what I can't do. So I just have to manage it, and I can't run too fast. I can't bike too fast and too long, and that's probably about where it's at. But obviously, when you don't, you don't do anything too high intensity or too many big miles, you sort of slowly lose all your strength and speed and everything, and you just become slow. But that's okay. And I bought a mountain bike during the first lockdown and online, and sort of taken up mountain biking. And I've hardly touched my road bike since then, just because it's just been a nice change. I want to get back on my road bike, but every time I go and look at the mountain bike and I look at my road bike, I kind of end up on my mountain bike. So, but obviously where I live, we're blessed with I've got the Christchurch Adventure Park mountain bike park next door, and the Crocodile Trail 10 minutes down the road, which is where they had the cross country nationals a couple of years ago. So it's just like this incredible thing in your backyard that you just have to use it, really.
Over the years, Scott, right through your career, from the self-coaching and taking advice, and then through in the later years, you seem to be the kind of person that understands your body and its capability at the time, and it seems to have gotten you through all sorts of adventures over the years.
Yeah, I think I had to listen to my body, and it's it's always done a few funny things, so I kind of like I said before, I mean, I trained pretty hard, but I could never do those sort of Cameron Brown big mile kind of stuff. Just didn't work for me. I just get slower and more tired. So 25 hours is probably my big week for me. 20 probably average, 20, 25, those sort of, reasonably big miles, but nothing, once you do a big long bike ride, that sort of eats up a chunk of it, and a bit of swimming. So it's really I just had to listen to what my body was doing. Otherwise, I don't think I would have lasted long. I don't know if that was related to this whole heart thing or it was just how my body worked. I don't really know, but I got there in the end. So that's,
Certainly did, yeah. Bike technology aside, do you think the sport has changed much since when you were racing and what you see now when your competitors out there?
Well, I think I think the likes of Tony and myself, we were in a period where, before I started and when Scott Molina was talking about, that first year and those first few years of Ironman New Zealand, and it was pretty, it was pretty basic stuff. I mean, everyone had no idea. No one had any idea about anything really. And, Scott could come over here and just smash people because he was a lot more advanced and and a great athlete, obviously, and a great guy and all those sort of things. But he around that 90 period, about 1990 onwards, things ramped up considerably. That we did, Ironman New Zealand had, very good international fields. We had, Sandvang, we had Hellriegel and the other German guy. We had Lothar Leder and
Stefan Holzner.
Holzner, and we also had gone out of my brain. We'll come back to the bike machine that won Hawaii. He came over one year as well. We had amazing fields. I mean, we just had incredible fields here. I mean, I think nowadays I probably don't know enough about it to really talk about it that much, but I think the technology has improved a lot. I was talking to Cameron about the bikes, and he said, they're just, you can go so much faster, and you're in so much better nick when you get off the bike as well, compared with the old bikes. But you still got to do the work. And there's also all that information out there that you can pick up nowadays. There's so much information, power meters and I think in our day you weren't even allowed to wear a GPS watch because that was considered cheating, sort of thing. So it's changed a fair bit from there. And you had to race. You were allowed heart rate monitors, but I only used one of those once. And it didn't work very well for me. That was 94, and it's just telling me stupid numbers, so I just took it off. So obviously the technology's changed a truckload, and the way people race and all those sort of things. It's a natural progression, I guess, to a natural development of the sport.
Yeah. And to wrap things up, Scott, your post Ironman career, you're back at university. You're an accountant now. You and Karen have got two lovely children. It sounds, you've really sort of, I guess, tapped into the life lessons from Ironman and built a pretty good life together.
No, we had our, whatever it was, 24th anniversary the other day, and we've been together since probably back in 92, I think. I sort of came back from Europe, and there was this new girl in the swim squad, and how was that, So I don't know how we both ended up winning Ironman, but that's just what it is. It's just that we only had a little swim squad in Johnsonville Pool in Wellington that had me and Karen and a couple of other guys, and there's probably only about 5 or 6 of us all together. Jill Westerner came down for a bit and did it, and her partner Trevor, and we had a good little group going there. But so we had a, I don't know, it was was a good thing. But yeah, no, life's good for you can definitely apply those lessons you learnt in the training and the racing and the preparation, and just sometimes you just got to grind things out and get through the tough bits and all those sort of things, valuable lessons.
Well, Cameron and I hugely grateful, Scott, for your time this evening. And, I guess I first got introduced to you and Karen in 2000 by our media mate, Ian Heppenstall. So I guess you and Karen were kind of my two pet Ironmans. And so it's a real thrill to sort of revisit all these things with you. And we'll be talking to Karen at some stage in the next day or two. But grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us on the Old School.
No, it's been good. Very good. Thanks for both of you. Very good. Thank you.